The Russian Empire was defending a highly strategic choke point at Osowiec fortress. The German army, with 14 battalions, around 7,000 heavily armed, waiting to march in. Defending the front trenches of the fortress were just a few hundred Russian soldiers, commanded by a 21-year-old sub-lieutenant, Vladimir Kuklinski. The Germans had spent days dropping heavy artillery on the fort, but the Russians wouldn't break. So the German High Command decided to deploy a new, terrifying marvel of modern industrial warfare: poison gas. At 4 a.m. on the 6th of August, the wind shifted toward the Russian lines. The Germans opened the valves on thousands of cylinders of a deadly chlorine-bromine gas mixture. A massive, dark green wave of chemical death rolled silently across the battlefield. The Russians had no gas masks. They had no warning. The physics of chlorine gas are brutally simple. When it mixes with the moisture in human lungs, it creates hydrochloric acid, dissolving the man from the inside out. The gas hit the Russian trenches and instantly turned the environment into an alien hellscape. The grass turned black, the leaves fell from the trees. Copper fittings of the soldiers' rifles instantly oxidized and turned green. The German artillery opened fire again, laying a barrage over the gas cloud. The German infantry put on their specialized breathing masks and began a casual, confident march toward the fortress. They were told by their commanders that the gas would leave no survivors. They weren't walking into a battle. They were walking into a graveyard. Inside the trench, Sub-Lieutenant Kuklinski and his men were dying. Their lungs were dissolving, they were suffocating, blinded by the gas, and coughing up blood and pieces of their own tissue. Every physiological instinct screams of a man that stayed to curl up in the mud and die. But Kuklinski possessed a mastery chilling the level of stoicism. He realized he was already dead. The poison was in his blood, his expiration was just a matter of minutes. But the fortress had not fallen yet. He looked at the surviving men in his trench, about 60 to 100 soldiers in the exact same fatal condition. He didn't order a retreat, and he didn't surrender to the inevitable. Kuklinski ordered these dying men to tear off strips of their undershirts, soak them in water or their own urine, and tie them around their ruined faces. He drew his pistol, rallied his corpses, and ordered a counterattack. When the 7,000 advancing German soldiers reached the edge of the Russian trenches, they expected to step over dead bodies. Instead, the earth erupted. Out of the thick, green chemical fog charged Kuklinski and his men. They looked like literal demons. Their skin was chemically burned, and peeling their faces were wrapped in blood-soaked rags. They were making horrifying rattling sounds as they struggled to breathe, literally coughing up pieces of their own lungs onto their uniforms. But their bayonets were fixed, and they were charging with the absolute, unhinged fury of men who no longer had anything left to lose. The German soldiers were professional troops, but they were not prepared for this. The industrial logic of their weapons had failed. The gas was supposed to kill the enemy, but the enemy was right in front of them, bleeding from their eyes, roaring through shattered lungs, and driving steel into their ranks. The sheer, terrifying sight of the dead men completely shattered the German morale. Panic, pure, infectious terror, ripped through the 14 battalions. Thousands of heavily armed German soldiers broke formation and ran for their lives from a few dozen dying men. In their absolute desperation to escape the nightmarish figures chasing them, the Germans trampled their own men and became entangled in their own barbed wire traps, while the dying Russians shot them down. Kuklinski and his men successfully routed the entire German vanguard and secured the fortress lines. They held the choke point. Later the same evening, the chemical damage finally overtook his body. Sub-Lieutenant Vladimir Kuklinski, 21 years old, suffocated to death from the gas exposure. The rest of the dead men followed him shortly after. They did not survive the war, but they completely broke the equation of modern combat. They proved that no matter how lethal and efficient the enemy's machinery is, it cannot account for the terrifying power of the human spirit when it simply decides to ignore its own death.